Every year, Mohammed Zaid builds a solid building that he wants to get an imtiaz and get the first place in the class, and she learns German so that he can travel abroad, choose his own business, and remain a millionaire, other than the lady who is engaged in advertising and marketing, and the sister who is learning to bake baked goods with little filling without nonsense ingredients, and the one who is trying to learn any skill that earns you money in these difficult circumstances, and between a little time and difficulty learning, and the need was common among countries of talent, all of them knew that they would fail after the first month, and take them, the able Professor Abla Camel came, and we put our hands on our cheeks. We go back to saying that next year, God willing, we will start again with guests. That's why Gorshkov came from the author of the book for our episode today and said, forget about the rest of this talk. I will tell you how we can learn any skill in the world. In just 20 hours, I can imagine that his grandfather is addicted to learning, by the way, and every day he has an idea for a new project or hobby that he would like to learn just like us. He arrived at this method after he succeeded in teaching himself programming, music, surfing in the sea, and directing. And very many things. He is a group doctor and has responsibilities, as well as a husband and father. I followed this method in the book for our episode today, entitled The First 20 Hours. We go back to our friend Josh, who, as we said, was addicted to learning and learned a lot of things in a short time, and he says that this is the problem facing all of us. It is that the things we want to learn require skill, and skill requires time and time effort. We always say we do not have time, and effort is difficult. In fact, it is easier for us to hold the mobile phone, watch videos, and wander through nothing, and not make an effort or anything, especially if there is a need. I am very tired at the idea of learning anything new. It is not fun at all. In the beginning, on the contrary, it remains very stifling, and for hours you feel failure and frustration that you do not know how to master it, and the person is also hasty and loves quick achievements, so we go to two positions completely. Josh was aware of all these facts, and what frustrated him the most was a study done in 2008 at the University of Florida, and I remember in the book The Online Rose saying that what makes people very successful and distinguished in a certain field is training for 10,000 hours, meaning 6 hours of continuous training every one day for 5 years. Of course, many people were frustrated by the idea of the 10,000 hours needed to learn any skill, and they overlooked that this study was talking about fluctuations, not just learning the skill at a good level, meaning people who want to play like Messi or Cristiano, not even like Da Vinci. They really need 10,000 hours of training to reach professionalism. George kept telling you that I want to remain a professional and I don't have time. In fact, all I want is to understand and know how to practice any skill that I learn at a reasonable level. So he decided not to give up on this idea. Time is at stake, the 10-point system. 000 hours, the professional stood by and said, let's start with 20 hours of effort with intelligence, focus, and attention. This 20 hours means 6 hours a day for 5 years, now 5:40 a.m. day for a month. Very suspicious difference. But to understand why this number? How is the difference so big? We must first understand the learning curve. If we focus on the learning curve, we will find that on the y-axis is the extent of our quality and improvement in learning the skill, and on the Chinese axis the amount of our practice of this skill. We will find a learning curve that increases very quickly at first, then begins to decrease to the point that it shows a constant. From this curve, we can conclude that any skill we are trying to learn, we develop it very quickly in the beginning, and this is because we know the basics and important needs. After that, the more we develop, every time we talk about the complex things that differentiate between special and ordinary people, up to here we can benefit from your husband's 20-hour rule, and this is because we will learn the basic details of the skills in 20 hours, but if we want to reach the level of experience and remain professionals in this skill, then that is it. Second topic, and without thinking too much, I will tell you that we often need to be experts in one or two skills, and those who are in charge of our currencies, for example, and apart from them, you will find dozens of other skills that you need to learn. Without remaining an expert, this is where the importance of the 20-hour rule comes in. This rule has three very important advantages. The first advantage is that you can complete all skills in 20 hours. This means you can learn Word or Excel or details in montage and graphics, and after these 20 hours, you no longer need anything else of this skill, or at least at all. You will have overcome the barrier of difficulty and boredom in the beginning, and you will have reached a good result that will make you able to continue and build on this skill. And this is the second advantage, and this is because many times we start learning new things, and with the first difficulty we encounter, we lose passion and say no. It didn't turn out to be as fun as I thought, and we withdraw from the experience without giving ourselves a chance to try it. So the 20 hours ensure that you overcome the boredom of the beginning and overcome the negative thoughts that you cannot do as a mother. The third advantage of this system is that after 20 hours, you may feel that this skill is not suitable for me at all after I got to know it well, and at that time you will move to another skill with a conscious decision and without losses. All of this is to make you aware of the importance of this system and its advantages before we say we will start implementing it yet. But the last thing before we start explaining the exact rules of this system, it is important you know that there is a difference between acquiring a skill and learning, and if we take languages as an example, then he says that he preferred to learn the Spanish language in school for 4 years. The grades were very high, but if you came to ask him any sentence in Spanish, he would not be able to answer you like us. We don't all graduate. We don't know how to speak French, German, or even English, even though we learn thousands of vocabulary, grammar rules, and verb conjugation. But we were not actually acquiring the language or speaking it. This is because learning a language is different from acquiring the skill of speaking and practicing it. If Josh's goal from the beginning was to practice the language, it would have been enough for him to try to have a conversation with them and practice with one of the native speakers of the language. This would have been enough for a few weeks. It was worth the many years of education, and finally we came to the awaited question, what are the steps that I will be able to acquire any skill? In 20 hours? My friend, there are 10 steps. The first step is choosing the appropriate skill. Life is short, and a person's lifespan is very limited. A person must be careful about the things he chooses to learn and spend his time on, and prioritizing is important. It is not useful to go and learn the language of penguins if you do not have a language that you know how to work with, for example. As for the second step, it is to focus your energy on one skill, and do not try to learn more than one skill at the same time, because this will waste your time and distract you, and you will not be able to build one skill properly. I mean, it is better for you to spend 20 hours in one skill instead of combining 20 skills in 20 hours in parallel. Do you think that you are not dividing your time like this? But you also divide your focus and ability. We come to the third step, which is determining the target performance level, and your description of the performance you want depends on the reason you chose the skill in the first place. I mean, if you learn editing, Then you have to decide what exactly you want to learn, and how do you want the video to turn out. If you choose a hobby to enjoy your time, you will want to reach the point where the feeling of frustration disappears, and you will actually start enjoying practicing this hobby only, and so on. After you determine what you want to achieve with this skill, you come to step number 4, which is to break down the skill into smaller subskills. This means that you should not be afraid to learn the skill from references to each other. This is how you will divide each skill into parts. This means that if you learn a language, you will find that you have 4 subskills, which are listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And if you learn montage, you will have the ability to add effects or effects, cutting the video, and so on. When you break down the skill in this way, you will begin to learn each part individually, and this will make your achievement clear, and you will know exactly what you have finished and what you have left behind. The 5th step is to obtain the necessary tools. You cannot say, "I want to learn skateboarding," for example, when you do not have a skateboard, paint, or anything else, and do not depend on other people's tools, because it is possible that at a time they will no longer be available and you will feel frustrated, and the idea that you have all your tools is complete. This makes you benefit maximum. Take advantage of this skill, and do not stop. As for step number 6, my friend, it is to get rid of training obstacles, which means staying away from distractions such as mobile phones, social media, and television. There is also a lot of effort that is wasted on small things, such as not having prepared the tools. If you don't prepare for what you want at all, or psychological obstacles such as fear or feelings that come at the time of exams and at the time of anything important, such as self-flagellation and crying over the ruins. I tried to do something like postponing this until you achieve your goal so that you don't worry too much and remain hurt, and also fail to achieve your goal. Step number 7 is to allocate time for training. This means that you do not have to work with your pool or your support. You must make a specific schedule, divided into 20 hours. You can make it an hour every day or an hour after a quarter, and so on. The 8th step will make a huge difference for you. It is the feedback or the standard by which we will measure. How successful have we been? It is important that we are able to constantly know the extent of our progress and the extent of the path we have traveled, and we are learning, meaning that we do not stop walking and leave ourselves to the end, and the measure here differs from one skill to the next, meaning if you are learning to bake, then the texture of the dough may be a measure in the text before the final measure, which is the taste. But if you learn programming, you will ring the code and find it working. This is the scale, and so on. The 9th step is training using a timer. Set a time for yourself in which you will not do anything other than training. Finally, my friend, step number 10, which is to focus on quantity and time and stay away from idealism so that you do not feel like failure by not achieving the required level. And remember that here we are not looking at the professional level, and thus we have concluded the steps for quickly acquiring any skill, and you can take them like this, and be ready to begin. At length, but after that, George talked to us about the types of learning, and we said that there is a difference between learning and acquiring a skill, and he said that we need to understand the methods of effective learning, in order to benefit from the 20-hour rule as much as possible. These methods are also divided into 10 main points. The first point is to conduct a simple research on the skill we want to learn, so that we understand the main lines of the skill and not get lost when we start. After this research, we take time to think about the skill in depth. In this stage, we will determine the references from which we will study, whether they are read, audio, or videos. We will think about the references, the skill, and what we want to do. After that, we will think about the scenario that could happen if we did not learn this skill. What is the negative effect that would happen if we became lazy or enlarged our brain? What is the benefit? This point will create motivation and will encourage you while learning the skill. The writer also believes that it is important to familiarize ourselves with the important and complex terms in each skill, so that the path will be easier while we learn. Moreover, we can ask the experts in the field in which we want to develop, and their advice will be summarized for us. And it will make it a lot easier for us. Also, one of the important things about learning any skill is that we apply it a lot, and this application can take up the largest percentage of the 20 hours. This means that we can learn the skill theoretically in 5 hours and sit the rest of the time applying what we have learned, and the proportions here differ from one skill to the next. However, we need to review the skill that we trained on every once in a while so that we do not forget it over time. Josh advises that we write all the advice in the form of bullet points. They are numbered, and we hang them in front of us so that we do not forget while learning. Just as it is important to imagine what our lives would be like without learning the skills we need, it is also important to put imaginations and say what is supposed to happen when we learn the skill, and with the passage of time we begin to compare reality with the imaginations we put together. We will see if we are walking correctly. No problems? The 10th and final point in effective learning methods is to take into account our limits. Take into account how much we will tolerate. We take into account our concerns and stop beating ourselves up over what is empty and boring. It is important that we know that not all of us work in the same way. In the end, let us say that your husband and whoever is not successful in learning many things according to the 20-hour rule, unless he remains convinced that he can learn in a small and logical number of hours, and that he does not have to be the best person in the thing he is learning. And by the way, this method of learning, IT, is the one used by Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, and others. These celebrities learn in a way called devoting time. Every day they learn something for an hour, 5 days a week, and this makes them learn an average skill every 4 weeks. The writer begins the book. The dream sentence is not "it is difficult to achieve," and this is very true. The whole idea is to convince yourself that there is a possibility that you will achieve what you want if you put in the appropriate effort, and only that.